All right, well, it is Easter. That must be why I've been wearing this all day. Did you need a picture?
Yes.
I've been watching too much of America's Next Top Model. Well, this is Easter, and I find it interesting how they determine when Easter is. The Bible never actually says Easter occurred on this specific date at this specific time. They do say it happened the Sunday after Passover. You would think, given that, hey, there's blue lights on. There should be blue lights on. There we go. That's better. Now you can focus more on me. You would think, given the fact that it was the Sunday after Passover, that that's when Easter always would be. Passover this year is April 19th. Still a few weeks away. Now, admittedly, Passover does change in conjunction with the secular Judean calendar that we use, but that's because they go by the Jewish calendar, and the Jewish calendar isn't exactly the same length as our secular calendar, so it sort of shifts around a little bit, so they can correct things. So it's usually, though, within April, within a few weeks, that's when Passover is. So you would think, as I said, being the only mention in the Bible of Easter being right after Passover, that that's when they would have it. But no. That would be easy. That would be simple. That would make sense. Worse, far worse. That would make it seem Jewish. And early Christian leaders were trying to distance themselves from Judaism. So they had to come up with a Christian idea of when Easter would be held. So they got thinking around and they thought, what is one of the most important pagan holidays around? I know, the spring equinox. The spring equinox, by the way, this year was this past Thursday. The equinoxes, there are 2 a year, and they are the 2 times of the year, I should say. Yes, there are 2 a year, and they're the 1 time a year. Right, that makes sense. They're the 2 times a year when the days equal the nights. 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of nighttime. That's the equinox. Equal time. That's not exactly what it means. It actually means equal night. So they thought, we'll take that date, the equinox. But that's not good enough. We can't just say, we'll hold it the Sunday after the equinox. Again, that would be too simple. So let's find something else that has absolutely nothing to do with Christianity, but is incredibly important to many pagan beliefs. The full moon. So what we'll do is we'll look for the spring equinox. And then the first full moon after the spring equinox, which, by the way, was Friday. The Sunday after that is when we'll have Easter. Which is why we are having Easter 1 week after St. Patrick's Day, instead of in April, when it should be. Which is why Easter shifts around so much. Sometimes it's in late April, sometimes it's in early April, sometimes it's in middle of April, sometimes it's in March. Get any more confusing, we'll be holding it in October. But it just amazes me when I first found out how they determine this, how pagan Easter is. Now the equinox wasn't, well, it kind of always was important. I mean, a day that is equal in length to the night. That's sort of magical. It has a magical sound to it, magical feel to it. The spring equinox is particularly important. because it marks the beginning, not of the new year. The winter solstice always marked the beginning of the new year. Winter solstice is around December 21st. That is the longest night of the year, when they waited for the sun to be born. Many ancient people believe that around December 21st, well, at the winter solstice, the old sun, the old year, died. A new sun, a new year, was born. That's how we get the imagery of the old Father Time handing the year over to the baby New Year. It was the sign they all were looking for, the birth of the new baby, the new year. Well, the baby was born on December 21st. December, of course, being the perfect month to be born.
Yeah, right.
Right, Stu? Several of us here agree. And has been growing up ever since. I assume February is its terrible twos, when it throws fits of snowstorms. I mean, anybody born in February is just terrible. Usually I can get several people with that one, but Matt and Karen aren't here today. And it is growing slowly in age to this point. The spring equinox. And to a lot of people, the year was coming of age. It's no longer a child, it's becoming a teenager now. And in most ancient cultures, 12, 13, 14 years old, anywhere around there where you came of age, you became a productive part of society suddenly. If it was a farming community, you were expected to be out there helping farm. If it was a hunting-gathering community, men were out hunting. Girls were out gathering. You hit this age, you were now a productive part of life. Of course, that also was back in an era when people lived to be 30 or 40 years old. So, if you're living to be 30, 15 is middle-aged. Think about it. I assume I'll never know when I hit middle-aged until I die.
That's right.
You gotta think about it. If I live to be 80, 40 was middle-aged. If I live to be 120, 60 will be middle-aged. If, as I plan on doing, living to 400, 200 will be middle-aged. I once thought I would stick around until people started making sense, but I realized I didn't want to spend that much time. So the year, to many of these ancient cultures, 13, 14 years old around now. It's productive. And they know it was productive because of what's happening all over the place. Little shoots are starting to come up out of the ground. We've got quite a few flowers that have pushed up. Some of them are already this tall. See, the year went from being barren and unproductive to producing. That's also when you start seeing animals who hibernate coming out. An awful lot of animals just hide for the winter. Some migrate. They're starting to come back. We have this large field behind our house. And this year it is lakeish. And some mornings when I wake up, I think I'm in the middle of a traffic jam. Because all I hear in that back field, and I get up and there are dozens of geese all over the place. They're just honking away. Life is returning. The world is becoming productive again. Growth is occurring. life has returned. That's what the spring equinox meant. But that's also what the moon meant. Many ancient people used to believe that the moon died once a month. It would slowly get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller till it was gone. And a new moon would be born. That's why we call it that, the new moon. And it slowly gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it's at its full vitality, a full moon. So when they were looking around for a time to hold Easter, they thought, I know, let's take the spring equinox, symbolic of the land coming back to life, of the year coming of age, being productive. And we'll take the full moon, symbolic of life returning and strength. And we'll use those as our determining factor of when Easter should occur. Because what gets lost in all the hoopla and all the everything else is that it's just a story of resurrection. You know, I probably got to be one of the only ministers in the country right this minute who is saying it's just another story of resurrection. But then again, I probably have read more myths than most other ministers, and I've come to realize that almost every religion had stories of resurrection. As a matter of fact, I just told you 2 of them. The year dies on the winter solstice and is resurrected the next day. The moon dies at the end of each cycle and is resurrected the next day. Those are 2 powerful myths that most cultures had. The very idea of resurrection was no big deal to most ancient people. When people came along, you know, we've got this imagery today that people went running through the streets, Jesus resurrected, oh my God, it's a miracle. Back then it was, did you know Jesus resurrected? What, another one? It happened all the time. There was even somebody who once wrote that your religion cannot count unless there is magic. 3 things. There has to be magic acts. There has to be a child of God. And then there has to be a story of resurrection. Jesus was the Son of God. He worked miracles. He resurrected. It was a formula. We read the 12 labors of Hercules as just a story. To them, it was miracles. He did the impossible. He might have done them in clever ways instead of magic. Still miraculous. And I happen to mention Hercules because, 1, he's famous. I mean, he had his own TV show for a while. 2, he's the Son of God and of a mortal virgin woman. And 3, when he finally died, his father, Zeus, reached down into his grave, resurrected him bodily, and took him up to Olympus to live as a god. Common story back then.